if you are looking for that perfect handle everything, do it all build to do dungeons in New World, well, I got just the build for you. Looking to step up your game, maybe start doing mutations, work your way up to M10, trying to get those gold runs, trying to put out some heavy DPS, and be super versatile and very well welcomed in all of your groups. Well, I got just the video for you and just the build. So let's jump right into it. What build are we using? We're using the Great Axe and a Hatchet. And the skills we're using on our Hatchet, Berserk, and right now we have Infected Throw. You definitely could switch that one over to the Rending Throw. Very good option to go. But then we have the Raging Torrent, and that covers all our skills on our Hatchet. And on our Axe, we have Maelstrom, we have Gravity Well, and we have Reap. All three are crowd control skills. The purpose of the axe is not to put out damage. It is simply to use the skills and gather up the enemies, and then we pull out the hatchet and we go to town. So the hatchet did get some nerfs recently. It doesn't have quite as big of a crutch for survivability as it used to, but it does still have that crutch. So it's still very strong with that versatility of survivability, and it does still put out some pretty darn good damage. Something that you can take all the way up to the M10 gold level. It's going to scale. And right now, I'm running 5 con on it. You know, getting started off, you might not run 5 con. Let's go over to the attributes. You know, what we're looking to do is get, roughly 250 strength, 250 dex. Why do we not go all strength, you might be wondering? Since the axe only scales off of strength, the hatchet scales off of strength and dex, but why not just go all strength since the axe will only scale off of strength? Well, for one, we're not trying to get our heavy output damage with our axe. That is what the hatchet's for. The axe is just there to do a small amount of damage, but mainly for the crowd control. Then we pull out the hatchet to do the damage. And if we go over to our attributes, anything beyond, so both of these scale mainly off of strength, and the hatchet scales secondarily off of dexterity. Anything past 250, you get diminishing returns though. So beyond 250, you're actually going to get more returns going into dex up to 250. So that's why we go up to 260 strength, reap a little bit of extra benefit out of our axe, and then we go to 250 dex. But, perhaps you are thinking, ooh, that's kind of neat. Got a nice little sale here. So perhaps you're thinking, well, I'm getting started. I'm not quite comfortable going to 5 con yet. I'd probably say go to 250 strength, kind of get the max benefits out of that. And then we could scale this back down to say 150, and we'll jump our con up to say 115. I wouldn't want to go much higher than that as con as a DPS. If you really need to, if you're just getting started out, pump it up to 150 or so, 250 strength, and the rest into dex. And you're still going to put out some pretty decent damage, but you're definitely going to want to slowly work your way. Get to 100 as fast as you can. You're still going to be very helpful in putting out high amounts of DPS, and you get a lot of survivability because at 100 you get this extra bonus of health. But as soon as you can, start cut back to 50, crank up your dex some more. Then, once you're feeling it, you're getting better and better, just drop that con right on down. And of course, that is going to depend on your equipment. If your equipment isn't all dex and all strength, if you got some constitution mixed in there, obviously it's not going to be possible to go right down to 5. But just keep that in mind when you are investing in your equipment, that down the road, if possible, you want to have strength or dexterity on all of your equipment, and that is going to allow you to min-max as you improve and get better down the road. So that covers that. We will go to the tree here. We're going to show you the tree that we're using. I already showed you the skills, but so not going to go super in depth with all of this, but this is basically all about crowd control. Take a screenshot of it, copy it, try it out. You can check out all the other little things if you want. Some people like to use charge. It's nice to have the extra mobility, but it's just not necessary. It's really more important to have extra crowd control skills. So that's what we're going with on our Great Axe. And then the Hatchet, we are going with Berserk. We're going with the Raging Torrent. And we have Infected Throw selected right now, but going with the Rending Throw would be a good option. There is another build where I hear that you do get higher damage output without taking, the Berserker and the Defy Death. Maybe take the Berserk, but I'm not too familiar with that build yet, and I haven't played around with it. But this is a very strong, very versatile build. It's going to give you that extra Defy Death survivability. You're going to have the Berserk, and it's going to help you do extra damage and all that good stuff. So one thing to keep in mind is the gem you put in it. Right now I do have a taunting gem because I do also use this one as my tanking hatchet. But what I would tell you to do or suggest, just go ahead and throw a cut pristine topaz, for example, if you're going into Lazarus or any ancient, because it's going to convert 50% to lightning, and lightning scales 30% stronger. It's going to do 30% bonus damage. You could throw in something like a opal, extra 15% damage while your stamina is not full, so that's not guaranteed that every time you get an extra damage. Whereas if it is against ancients or whatever the specific mob you're going against is weak to, you're going to get that guaranteed extra damage. So 30% on 50%. So that's basically, you're getting the same amount of damage, except you're getting it every single time you hit them. So I would suggest just go ahead and throw the cut pristine topaz if it's ancient or whatever the mob you happen to be fighting against is weak to. Another thing you can consider is putting one of these augmented electrified. You get these rune glass cases, and then they do extra damage, but the only problem is it's going to be common for a lot of people to be putting this in, and it really only benefits you if only one person on your team has this exact type. But most people are going to start putting this type, so it's not that bad of an idea just to stick to the regular, because this one only converts 40%, but it adds a tick damage, but it's only going to add 1 tick damage per team. So you could convert it instead to 50%, and you're going to get extra damage out of this one versus 2 teammates using the same exact augmented electrified rune glass casing. So just something to keep in mind. And our equipment, I do have some very nice equipment. I'm fortunate enough to do that. In my last video I shot, I don't think I had this piece, but I just got it to drop recently. So you really just got to get started on the mutations. Even if you don't have the best perfect gear, you just got to get started, and you're slowly going to get better and better drops. See, this is an awesome piece of gear. Has full strength on it, elemental eversion, which is always going to be good in mutations, ancient ward, which is obviously a must-have, and refreshing. Could be possible to have maybe a better perk, but it's hard. That's a very, very good perk. This is as good of a piece as I could ask for. It's medium, and the rest are light. I used to have a light chest piece, so I wasn't maximized in my total armor here. Is the closest you can get this to 13 without crossing the line, the higher armor you're going to have. So the best way to do that is with a light everything except a medium chest. So, and of course you're going to want to put whatever gem the specific mutation has, and the current mutation we are doing is a Hellfire in Lazarus, so that means that we need to have fire resistant gems. So like I said, I haven't used this piece yet, so I didn't slot the fire resistant gem in there, but we have fire resistance in all of this stuff. And one thing to keep in mind, one thing that helps me get down to 5 con is in my amulet, it has flame protection built into the amulet itself. We also of course do have the gem, But if you have an amulet that has specific protection built into it against the specific mutation type, that's going to help you big time get down to the low con numbers. So if you don't have this, you probably do want to crank your con up to, say 50, maybe even 100. But as you get better, try to find one of these amulets, start dropping down your con, get down to 50, then try to get down to 5. But so what else I'm rocking here? I got leeching, slash damage because both of my weapons are doing slash, and hardy for some extra stamina. We're doing all kinds of dodges and whatnot, and you never know, sometimes things get hairy, tank goes down, or you get a bunch of aggro pulled on you because you're doing so much damage, and you have to start dodging and blocking, and the more stamina you have, the better off you are going to be when things get sticky. So my earring I'm rocking, regenerating, refreshing toast, and refreshing evasion. The main important one here is refreshing toast. Just try to get 2 other good perks and you'll be just fine. And like I said, you're not going to start off with this good of gear right at the start. But I was doing M10s with 1 perkers, 1 and 2 perkers. It's just what I had to get started with. You can make it work. But, of course, as you want to try and get better and better, start carrying the team more and more, start doing those speed runs, whatever it may be, you definitely want to start improving your gear. Just get started, and, once you're doing the mutations, that's where the good stuff drops. I've been using the Cunning Heart Rune of Grasping Vines. It adds some weaken, and it does some leeching. So we're going to weaken the mobs, and we're going to leech some health off of them. So definitely something that can help you get out of sticky situations when you are a low con user. But I also do like to use, somewhere down here, I do have the Brutal Heart Rune of Detonate. You do take extra damage while you are using this, so you gotta be really careful. But it does put off a nice little bang and helps you output some extra damage. It's going to help you output even more DPS than the Grasping Vines, but this one can help you with survivability and all kinds of good stuff. It can help hold clumps together and help you kill stuff faster just because you're keeping the clump nice and tight if you use it right. So that kind of covers the gear that we're using for this run, so why don't we go ahead and jump right into that run. So the first thing I need to mention is make sure you are using coatings and honing stones. And also I am using either ward pots or gem dust, which can help me out in sticky situations. Go ahead and pop one of those and they are going to mitigate some of your damage. I got those in my number 6 slot. So you can see I let the tank go in first. We kind of make sure everything starts to get set up. Go ahead and use our maelstrom, trying to drag some of the units in. We use our big old gravity well, and we just start going to town. And just like that, we pretty much got all of the ads nuked down, and we're just going to work on finishing off the boss. So, nice and quick and simple. Nice and smooth so far. We took a nice little heavy hit there, but that's going to happen. But it's one nice thing about that Hatchet, it does have that life save. It only works for 0.5 seconds now, so you can't just hang out in the death zone when it pops. You gotta get yourself to safe zone. But we go ahead, we chuck in our gravity well, go ahead and use our maelstrom, which is going to help gather them even more, and it's also going to add weaken to all of the mobs. So then we just go ahead and we grab our hatchet and we go to town. So anytime you can, you want to try and get behind, the back sides of the mobs from the tank, but it's not really working here because he's facing them head on and we cannot get behind the mobs. So we do what we can, but we just kind of keep going at the clumps and we just go to town. We do have our hatchet out, so if we see ourselves hit that death defy, we know we can just run away and get to safety real quick before we get knocked down. But you can see this hatchet, it still puts out some really heavy duty damage. Of course, it does help that I'm down to 5 con. But even if you do have to hop up to 50 or even 100 con, you're still gonna do some pretty darn good damage. But look how wonderful that gravity well is. Super versatile with this build. Tons of crowd control and tons of damage output. Look at all those numbers. Your Hatchet does some pretty good AoE. Not quite as good AoE as something like the Great Sword, which just hacks and whacks right through everything. But it still puts off some pretty good AoE on tight clumps. So we mowed right through the portals. And on to the next spot. You know, typically just kind of let the tank do his thing, let him go in first, and sometimes you can help him gather up some of the straggler mobs, drag them back through him. So if you're ever in a situation where you end up with a mob on you, try to drag them back through the pile, and chances are they're going to get caught up and the tank is going to regain their aggro. But just like that, another clump just nuked using our gravity wells, our maelstroms, and just hacking away with our Hatchet. Moving right along. You know, there's no guarantee how your team is going to play each part of this dungeon, or any dungeon for that matter. Typically, if I'm the tank, I'm just going to run right in there and I'm going to go take care of it down there. But, you know, they decided that they wanted to haul these guys up here, so it doesn't pay to go down there and get killed by yourself. So, even if it takes a few seconds longer, not as long as if you just ran in and got killed all by your lonesome. So, kind of go with the flow as a DPS. You're not really running the show. Typically, either, you know, sometimes the healer might run ahead and do a pull if he thinks it's the right move, or else wherever your tank goes, you let him go in first when possible. Definitely there's times when you can go and get a pull started yourself, but I would hold off on trying to do that until you are, you know, well versatile. Maybe you've done some tanking yourself, so you understand when and where and how. Or if you are running with your own group and you got your certain way of doing things, well, sometimes it makes sense to go ahead and pull some mobs to your teammates. So we do have to collect some stuff. As much as I don't enjoy that, I'd rather just be getting in on the action and going to town, dropping our gravity wells, pulling out our Hatchet, going to town, mowing down some mobs. But unfortunately, got a little situation here. Our tank went down, so just in case I had the aggro, I started running away, hoping that they would chase after me, but I guess somebody else must have had most of the aggro, but they did eventually go running out. So anytime you see your tank go down, be on the lookout, because the mobs can instantly turn on you and knock you out in an instant, especially if you're at 5 con. But even if you're at 100 con and a group of mobs turns on you, you're done if you don't dodge, block, whatever. So always gotta be on lookout. If your tank goes down, be ready to dodge, be ready to block, do what you gotta do, and stay alive. So once again, just kind of waiting to see what's gonna go on here. Obviously letting our tank lead the way. That way he can get the aggro and we don't die. We're at 5 con only, so only takes a few whacks from the mobs and we're dead. So we kind of let the thing develop. We go ahead and use our reap to try and drag this one enemy a little bit closer. But we go ahead and gather this one mob with our big old gravity well. You can see just how nice of a job that does. And then we go to town with our Hatchet, hacking away, putting out some pretty darn good DPS. You know, perfect example of just how strong this build is. You're doing a little bit of everything. You're gathering the mobs for your teammates, and you're also outputting some really good DPS. So we got one of our guys running ahead to go ahead and call the next group of mobs. You know, we do have our gravity well ready, so we go ahead and gather these two together. Potentially we could have got a third one, but we didn't, and well, we'll make it work. So unfortunately I do end up going down here, get caught up in the middle of a few too many mobs, but life is gonna happen. It's gonna come at you fast sometimes when you only have 5 cons, so keep your head on a swivel, and you're still gonna go down once in a while. Even the best of the best, you know, the speedrunners that have the world records, they still go down on their runs, so it's nothing to be ashamed of if you do get a knock here and there. We are trying to avoid getting any full thirsts, so once you do get a knock, try to be a little bit careful until you can find another stone to touch. But obviously you can't just completely wimp out and not help your team out at all, so just try to play just a touch more smart once you get one single knock. And at this point it's going to be a while before we can get our down reset. And this is a little bit sketchy. I'm kind of getting hit on by quite a few enemies. Boss taking a shot or two at me. So typically what I would like to have done here is go in and, you know, we have all the mobs on the boss and we go in and fight the mobs. But fortunately I'm taking on quite a bit of aggro here, but this way it goes, running away, hoping I can drag some of the things with me. Waiting for you know, a little bit of help from the teammates, some teammates to get revived. And once we're in this situation, we're just trying to clean up the scruff around the edges. And then once we have that and it's down to just the boss, you know, it's going to be pretty easy to finally finish him off. Once we only have the boss to worry about, and we don't really got any more ads. His big slam, when you're down at like 5 con, he is going to one tap you. You gotta dodge it, you gotta be far enough away. So when you see him throw his hands up in the air, start to come down to slam his staff down, you need to start getting your butt out of the way. He definitely does get me time to time, especially if I'm playing spear and I get locked into animation and he does that slam. It's no good. It takes me right out. But one nice thing about the Hatchet, no big over dramatic animations. They can pretty much all be cancelled out of, and they're nice and slow, so it's no worries. You can just dodge your way out of pretty much whatever trouble you get into. Just another thing that makes this build so strong and so versatile. Just gotta be careful when you're pulling out that axe. One problem that I do run into sometimes, I go to use my maelstrom to add weaken to the mobs, and that's when they get me. Got in that animation, and I get myself into some trouble. So we're just kind of letting things set up, and we go ahead and drop this big fat gravity well on this nice juicy clump, and then of course we go to town with the hatchet. See, another example of just how strong this build is. And even though this doesn't have good CC, it has such good quick fast animations that you can get quick attacks and dodge, quick attacks and dodge. Where say something like the spear, it's got a really slow auto attack, and it's kind of clunky compared to the hatchet. The hatchet is one of the smoothest operating weapons in the game, really. So really strong. You know, once again, we're going to town, trying to gather our clumps up. We just name of the game. You let the tank go in, do his job. Every once in a while, you might use your hatchet, throw at some enemies to help gather them into the pile. But other than that, you let your tank go in, you let things develop, and then you drop your gravity well and go to town. You don't want to get too impatient. You know, you can run around the outskirts and you're just wasting your time fighting one mob at a time. Let things set up, and then when you see the perfect opportunity, drop your big old gravity well, drop a maelstrom on them to weaken them, and then just go to town with your hatchet. And before you know it, you got another clump just nuked right on down. So this boss is pretty easy for the DPS, you know, as long as the tank manages to keep the aggro and doesn't get knocked down so the boss doesn't come chasing after you. You basically just sit here and swing away. But you do have to be careful. If you see the tank go down or the tank lose aggro, you start swinging around at you at 5-con, you are going to get one tapped. So be ready to dodge if ever you should need. But as long as you got good DPS, you see this little boss. He's got this fist above his head with ×9 symbol, now ×10. All you need to do is take this to ×15. When it gets to ×15, you have somebody go ahead and drop the orb, and you're good to go. And I got taken out here. I guess the boss was getting swung around a little bit.
Stupid mistake.
And actually, what was that where I went to try and do a maelstrom? I think it was. Got locked into the animation, being an idiot, when I should have just been hatcheting instead of trying to add weaken. But that's the way life goes. We got knocked, but not full finished. So good to go. And we just keep hacking and whacking away. Just trying to keep monster, the boss, between you and your tank at all times. You get caught out in front of him and she's gonna take you out with one swing. So anytime you can, just don't get anywhere near her front side. See, we're at 8 stacks, 9 stacks, and I do have the hatchet with the weaken on it. So as soon as we get to about 10 stacks, I am gonna go ahead and throw my hatchet that adds weaken to the boss, and that's gonna help our tank out a little bit, give him a little extra survivability, and the rest of our teammates too, a little bit of extra survivability if we take a good whack. So definitely could go with the rending throw, which is gonna help you output just a little more damage, help your team output just a little bit more damage, as long as you're not already maxed out on rend. But there's nothing wrong with a little bit of weaken instead of a little bit of rend. You know, ideally, maybe you get the rending throw, but I like to have the weaken when I'm tanking. And I don't always like to switch my build every time between when I tank and when I DPS. So I can use either build for either DPS or a tank, but it's kind of whatever. I'm not too worried about it, so I just rock with whichever one I happen to be using at the moment. Whatever I feel like is the flavor of the week. They're both good, both very usable. So this part in the cages, it is nice if you have a spear go up on top, somebody with a hard CC. We definitely can handle it because we got some good crowd control, and then with our hatchet we can attack and dodge nice and easily. It's so smooth. But as I take a nice big heavy hit, but that's what happens, you get locked into the animation with the axe. Will I end up going down here? I don't know. I'm getting close. But anyways, once again, we're just kind of waiting. I go ahead and I drop my maelstrom, which is going to add weaken to these guys. And we can just kind of go to town mowing them down. So I do have my grasping vines up and ready to go, but probably just kind of saving it for a potential sticky situation in case we run into one. And we go ahead and we drop our gravity well. Might have even kind of missed them there, unfortunately. But regardless, we go to town and we just mow them right down. And we're on to the next step. But yeah, it's good to have somebody, a DPS with CC, go up to the very top cage with the healer. That way they get into a tight situation and they just knock over the enemy, stun the enemy. Here's a fun little thing that can work sometimes. You can see this tank, he has one of the mobs up top with him, but he trapped the other two down below him where they couldn't attack him. So that's kind of a smart little thing to do. Kind of a little pointer I picked out from him. Something that I've incorporated a little bit into my runs when I feel necessary. You know, if you can only have one mob banging on you instead of like 2 or 3, it all depends. Sometimes you'll be super unlucky and get like 3 archers to spawn in, and then they're just sitting there and just ranging you down. Kind of annoying. Things hit pretty hard, but nonetheless, we just move right along, and we got her taken care of quite well. Obviously, keep an eye out for all of your resources. You want to get all 10 to try and get your gold. So, like I mentioned before, I don't like collecting resources. I'd rather be up fighting. But since they are dragging this boss out, I really don't miss out on any fighting because we drag them out and we fight them down here. I just as soon go right in and fight them right up top, right where they are, right where they spawn in, but this way does work just well enough as well. So, and once again, anytime you can, try to stack on the archer. The melee guy is going to come to the archer, but the archer will not stack on the melee guy. So, if you stack on the archer, the melee guy is going to come to him, and then you can work on doing some AoE damage to both of them at the same time. Kind of make the process close to twice as fast. But nonetheless, regardless, we get it done. So next thing's next, we're moving right along. Just gonna go ahead and start opening this portal. Doesn't pay for me to sit back and help fight those 2 little mobs and then end up having our whole team waiting at this portal. So good idea to have one person run ahead and get started on the portal a little bit early. And sometimes people will pass up on these mobs. I don't remember if we did or not. Looks like we did. But sometimes it seems like these mobs will retreat, so it doesn't seem like they always make it all the way to the end. So a lot of times I like to just get them right at the beginning. That way you make sure you got them, make sure they don't retreat, and make sure you can get that kill count. You miss the kill count and you are not going to get gold unless you have like maybe a sub 15 time or something like that, but that is not an easy task. So just go ahead and kill everything you see. Make sure you reach that kill count and give yourself an opportunity to get gold. See, those little creepy crawlers are so slow that a lot of times by the time you get out of here, they haven't even caught up with you yet. So sometimes they get left in the dust, and sometimes it does cost you getting gold on your run. So this part's pretty basic, kind of boring. You just got a bunch of mobs that kind of spam separate apart from each other. You know, when you can, you try to gather them up into groups, but it does end up being a little bit of messy fighting for the most part. You got some of these different javeliniers that like to jump all over and throw spikes at you from a long distance away. You got a couple of archers, and everything spawns in kind of far away from each other. So super basic part of the run here. At this point, the run is basically over. By this point, you've either won or lost, depending on what your time is, depending on whether or not you've gotten enough mobs. So the hard part's over. We just gotta cruise and find out what we did. Did we get enough mobs to reach the kill count, or did we scuff it somewhere along the way? Well, we get one javelineer over here, one javelineer on the other side. Super annoying guys because they can just sit back and chuck their javelins, and it can be very hard to get them to group up. Of course, anytime you get them to group up, you can AoE them down together at the same time, and it takes about half the time. If you're doing double the damage, same amount of damage to each one, instead of doing full amount of damage one time, full amount of damage a second time. Just do a full amount of damage twice, or once. So you can see we do manage to get these archers pretty close to each other. That is due to the lovely thing called 2 gravity wells. One of us places one on one side, suck one of them in, the other places on the other side, suck the other one in, and just like that. Despite they were separated by a whole large distance, that super sick gravity well does the job, keeps us moving right along. So at this point, we just got one last minor boss, and then we got the last final boss. They're both pretty basic. This boss is pretty weak, dies really easy. And the last boss, he actually does hit pretty hard, so if you're at 5 con, there's a good chance that he can knock you. But depending on what my build is, sometimes I will even jump up to 55 con. So that's what I've been doing with my Ice Gauntlet and Rapier build. So I don't have any weaken built into it, so I can't make sure that the boss has weaken on him before he starts hitting me. So with that build, a lot of times, you know, it's not quite as safe of a build. So right when we get to the last boss, sometimes I'll jump up to 55 con or so on it, and just make myself a little bit more survivable. Because this guy, when he slams down, he really does give you a beating. Get you in the wrong situation and he can one-tap you. So as long as you have good DPS, you only need to get 1 orb here. If your DPS is a little bit lacking, you definitely will want to get both orbs, both on the left side and the right side, and let it go through 2 phases. But if you got strong DPS, just get the 1 orb and get it taken care of in 1 single turn. It's the way to go for sure. So we get the orb, we run in front, and we start attacking them. Super basic, we just go into town. And I did actually pull out my greatsword because it does do some higher DPS based on the build and how I got it set up. But pretty sure we're just saving it for when he gets knocked down. That way we can really output some heavy damage, worry-free, stress-free. No worries about getting hit, nothing like that. We just pull out our greatsword and we just go to town. So this fight is kind of boring does seem like it's been buffed a little bit, so at least you have to a little bit pay attention to make sure that you don't get knocked, but it's still a little bit of a boring match. So when you get to this point, even a little bit before that, when the bars are under the Sea of Chardas, if you do have both of the orbs, well, that is when he's going to drop another laser on you, and you go into another phase where he, falls on his face. But if you have good DPS, you end up waiting way too long. So you're best off to just keep DPSing away and keep picking away. You do a crazy amount more damage when he does go down. Just the amount of time you end up waiting for him to go down so you can do that huge amounts of DPS. Well, you can see there, I'm getting slammed by him, and I'm getting left with just like 5% HP or so. So he just wrecks me pretty hard. And you can see once again, just within inches, wrecks, yeah, pretty doggone hard. So and he does take me out, I was mentioning just how hard he does hit, but just before we finish it, so not a big deal. We get her done, we get her taken care of, we get the W, we get the gold run, and let's take a peek at the scoreboard. So we did have 3 respawns, we got all the named enemies, we got 100 out of 100, so we just barely squeaked by in that regards. We didn't have a whole lot of extra time, we only had an extra 4,300 points, so we definitely did not smash this run, but we did get gold, and we had a little bit of room to spare, so definitely a decent run. This was a completely random group from the group finder. So when you're running it with random groups, even if everyone from your group is super experienced, they do gold speed runs and yada yada yada, it's still not a guaranteed gold, because sometimes one player runs it a certain way, another player runs it a different way. So you get off key with each other, and you got one tank thinking that, well, we're going to do it this way, and you got another DPS thinking, no, we're going to do it that way, and a healer says, no, this is the way to do it. Pretty soon everyone's arguing, and you never even finish it because people are just egoing each other. But anyways, that's it. We covered it. If you got any questions, go ahead and let me know. But we're going to continue right along with another DPS build after this one. Catch you on the next video.